Good afternoon and welcome, or good morning if you're on the West Coast. Thank you very much for joining us for today's Q School Online. My name is Tyler Tremaine and I'm the Regional Sales Manager, one of the Regional Sales Managers. And I'm joined by
Mimi Leone, and I'm an account manager.
And so those that know the two of us, we are the inside and outside sales folks for most of the eastern part of the U.S. We look forward to spending a few minutes with you today and appreciate your time for joining. We look forward to talking about some part numbers and hopefully clarifying some of the process and trying to expedite this whole thing for everyone. Because as you can tell us in a couple of minutes, that there tends to be a couple of questions when we get the POs in. And we would love to expedite this and get all the products to everyone as quickly as possible, because I know that's what you guys would like as well. Before we get started, we wanted to announce that this is our 14th webinar. Although Maura and Guillen said it was 110 last week, they exaggerated slightly. Today is 14. You can find all of the previous webinars on our YouTube page, and you can register for that to get the updates every time we post a new webinar. So when going to our homepage, if we go to the products section and go down to the LED strips, on the left, you're able to sort by the type of LED strip, and here is the high efficacy. Choosing one of the different LED strips on this page, we can see the compatibility guide, all of the downloads, including the IES information, and we'll take a quick look at the ordering guide, where we see some of the delivered lumen output, the different types of connectors, and of course, the part ordering section that we're going to focus on here today. But before we get started, maybe have you ever had to ask any questions when you get a PO? Is there anything there that we just need to understand more?
You know, once or twice I have had to ask a couple questions to get a PO released.
Okay. And so what is your number one question you think you ask?
Definitely, is the LED factory installed, or is it going to be not installed in the extrusion?
Okay. So it sounds like it's factory finished, or a couple of other options, maybe not installed or getting everything in bulk.
Absolutely.
Let's see, another option. Oh, I've heard you mention this one. How would you like the run broken up?
Yes.
Can you sort of describe what you mean by that?
Well, a lot of times we'll get a PO and it says it's for 10 feet.
Okay.
But we won't know, do they want a straight 10-foot strip of LED to be put in extrusion? Do they want 2 5-foot fixtures? Do they want an 8-foot and a 2-foot fixture? How do they want the run broken up? That's
important. Yeah, we don't want to certainly assume what the project, what the application is like, and those are definitely the reasons we ask some of those follow-up questions. And then what about some other sort of like wire types or LED output or colors of extrusions in power supplies? Those ever forgotten?
Yes. We do need to know what the LED color will be, the extrusion finish, the output type. We basically need to know what it is that we're being asked to make. And a lot of times in quoting, we might have an X at the quote because it's not necessary at that time, but then to release the order, we do need to get that information.
Okay. So it sounds like we need to have the complete part numbers, which we're going to take a look at shortly. Let's do that. Actually, before we do that, and I did this earlier, let's show some examples of what some of the purchase orders or requests you've had, and then this kind of follow-up questions. We can show people what some of these sort of either mistypes or clarifications that we need. So the first one here looks at the 3 watt per foot tape and dry with a bare wire closed in 14 inches, and they want a Lalo extrusion with an S1 in 16 inches. So what's wrong with that one?
Well, when I look at that, I see the S1 and I'm thinking, okay, they probably want that installed because the S1 means that the LED is going to be installed in the extrusion. But I see that the LED is only 14 inches and the extrusion is 16 inches. So you'd have a dark spot about 2 inches if you ordered it that way.
And it might be just 2 parts, right? Because the way I read it, it sounds like you want a piece of LED at 14 inches and a piece of extrusion at 16. Yeah, okay.
We have to find out.
That's something we definitely would want clarification on.
Yep.
And then this next one looks a little confusing. That looks like the same tape and extrusion, but there's 10-foot number 10s. Can you explain what may be going on here?
Well, that is actually how we usually get a lot of our POs. So it'll tell us that they want 10 feet, but it doesn't explain how they want it broken up. And then the example below shows 10 and 10. 10, most likely it's 10 feet, but we need to clarify that to make sure that they don't want 10 units and there's a length missing.
Okay, that makes sense, because we normally do our ordering in inches, so
Yes.
I'm a little confused when I see the feet. I know we quote in feet,
Yes.
but to build all the fixtures, we'd like to know to the inch.
Exactly.
Okay. This next example, let's see, has the tape again with the bare wire close 120 inches in 2 extrusions with an S1 at 60 inches. Let's talk about that one.
Well, for that example, they have the LED being 120 inches, and the extrusion has the S1, which indicates that they're trying to have 2 finished fixtures. The problem is the LED is 120 inches, and our finished fixtures are only available up to 8 feet. So we would need them to clarify whether they want 2 finished fixtures or if they want the LED in a single strip with 2 60-inch pieces of extrusion.
Okay.
And
There's a big
yeah.
difference there. and I think we'll talk a little bit about those differences, but definitely want some clarification.
Yep.
Yes, sorry.
And so you can see the example right below that with the 119. Whoops, just up above.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. That shows what they would order if they wanted to get the LED in a single strip with 2 5-foot pieces that they'd push together. The example below shows what they would order if they were going to have 2 finished fixtures.
Okay.
And then the final one shows a pass-through with a bare wire.
Got it.
P for pass-through.
I think we're going to have to talk about that.
Yeah.
That S and P and some numbers have been confusing.
Yes.
So let's start with the LED and just look at the sort of ordering the part numbers. Let's review all of them, and then we'll talk about some of the areas that have been tricky. So as we start at the top, the product itself is the static white, 24 volt, 5 watts per foot. The rating itself is an environmental factor, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The CCT are the color choices for the different environmental options, followed by some of the lumen and CRI information for each of them. The next is the connector in and the connector out, and I see some bare wire barrel, and I think we'll talk about some of those options. Followed by a length, and please note that the damp has a different length than the others, and that's due to the machine that manufactures it, and we'll point that out in one moment. Or match, and that is telling the factory that they want us to build the fixture and send a fully finished fixture from the factory. Let's take a closer look. Okay, so the environmental factor. So looking at the LEDs here on the table, we've got the 3 different environmental factors. The dry, which is the standard LED tape that just has the board, the chips, with nothing else on it. The next in the middle is the damp option. So this is the same tape, but then we've put a polyurethane coating over the top to make this an IP54 rated LED strip. And then what makes the length of that different? It goes through the same machine we make our QCAP products, which are those fully encapsulated flexible fixtures, and we'll talk a little bit about them in a few moments. But that machine is limited in the length that we can do them, hence the 180 inches there. And then the final is the wet rated LED tape, and this is in a non-yellowing silicone sleeve for an IP67 rated product. The last that is on the list there is the ENC, or encapsulated. We're able to take the dry LED tape in some of our rigid extrusions and fully encapsulate that rigid extrusion for a totally waterproof option as well. But today we're talking about a couple of other things. So we're happy to talk about that at length. You can ask your rep about the encapsulated or any of your regional managers, and we'd happily talk more about those. So the next area, which I think is something that I've heard some about, are what are these different wire in, wire out options. So let's start with the most popular. Which is the one you see most often with any of our LEDs.
Okay. I would say 90% of the time it's bare wire closed.
Okay. And the
Use
bare
the
wire
bare.
is not just, copper wire, but it's just
no.
no connection at the end of a lead wire.
Exactly.
And the closed part is not meaning we're closed for business, just meaning that there is nothing else at the other end. And then another option, we could put bare wires on both ends, couldn't we?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so that'd be the wire in of bare wire
Yep.
and a wire out option of bare wire as well. We do have also the barrel, as we had mentioned. So here on the table, we've got samples of some of the dry rated barrels. So these here, and we could do those as well.
Yep. And we use those usually as connectors because the bare wire is what you're going to need to connect to the power supply. So the barrel you use to connect fixtures together.
Okay.
But bare wire closed, and that's why this is the most popular option. Connects
To
to the
make
power
that
supply.
home run back
Yes.
to the power supply? Okay. So now that we've talked a little bit about the different options available, they do correspond when building the fixtures. You talked about the S's and the P's. I think we need to clarify that next. So looking at the ordering for an extrusion, and this is an example of a torque, which are the extrusions we have up here on the table. So torque is the product itself, and the option for this is either satin, black, or bronze. A mounting option is a single stainless steel option for this extrusion. You've got your lens choices, and then your type, which we're going to talk about here, followed by the length of the extrusion itself. So let's take a little closer look at those S's, P's, and other types. So what do they mean? What is an S and a P? What are they?
S is for single.
Okay.
So for example, on a fixture that has bare wire coming out of it and then a closed end, it's single.
Okay.
It's just one end.
Okay.
The P stands for pass-through.
There might be one over here.
I think so. Let me grab it.
Yeah.
So for example, on this fixture, it's got bare wire, bare wire. So anytime it's bare wire, it has to be a P.
Okay.
Otherwise, the bare wire can't get out.
That's right. Hey, that's good. I like that. Perfect. So then we could do bare wire barrels or those other connectors if it's a P pass-through.
Exactly.
So the similar options we looked at are still available. Now it just depends on if you want that pass-through or single option, and then that leaves us not installed. So let's take a look at a finished fixture, and then let's talk about why you would choose the not installed option and what those benefits may be. Before we do that, I should probably explain what the numbers are. So we talked about the singles and the pass-throughs, and then there's 1, 2s, 3s, and 4s. The good news is we're not going to quiz anyone on what they mean. What we're trying to show is we have an option here, and this is a benefit but not a burden. So if you're specifying it, or any of our reps out there are looking to order the product before the PO, we can put anything we want, because it's not going to really affect the price. But when we come to ordering it, we need to know the details so everybody in the field knows what they're going to get, how it's going to be put together, and we can have a very, hopefully, seamless process. So the different letters depend on sort of where the wire comes out. So the S1s are always in the back. And as we can see on the slide in 1 second, shows the different letters sort of come out of the top, the back, the bottom, depending on sort of the options that you're looking for. And we certainly can help you with all of that. It is not a pop quiz. Please let us know, either let your rep know or your regional manager know, and we're happy to go through that with you. So let's take a look at what the differences are of a finished fixture versus a not installed option. So I'm going to move some of this clutter out of the way. So in the middle of the table here, we've got this black large extrusion, and we also have the ordering for it. So the ordering guide, and I'll go through that first, always starts with the LED. So it's the static white, 1.5 watts per foot, dry. This happens to be 3,000 Kelvin, and it's bare wire. bare wire in, and it's closed on the end, and Match told the factory to build it as a finished fixture with a torque extrusion in the color black. We do not have the mounting clips here today, but they would be included. With a diffused lens, single, because there's only one wire, lonely, but there's only one, followed by the length of the total finished fixture at 48 inches. So let's imagine for a moment that this actually was a full-length extrusion. Everyone's going to have to use imagination for 1 second, because what if a customer comes to him and says, well, that's great that this represents your nominal 8 feet, but I really need something bigger than that. Okay, here's a great example where we can do a couple of things. We can do full length, we could do finished fixtures, much like an example here. So these similar finished fixtures, we could abut them together. They could be powered from the other ends. We could even remove the end caps, and that certainly is an option. But there will be a break between the LEDs, and there might be a small dim spot. And since the LED can go the length that we're looking at, so there's no issues with class 2 limitations and the 96 watt max, we could take an uninstalled extrusions. They could be mounted in the field, and then they can take the LED and insert this into the extrusions. And then next the lenses will go on. But what this offers is a continuous line of light over a length greater than our 8 foot, again, cannot exceed the class 2 limitations, but it'll give that very nice, seamless look, and the only break will be in the lens and the extrusion and not the light itself. So that's one of the reasons that we recommend that not installed for anything over 8 feet if they're looking for that. There will be times that it makes more sense for the project to have finished fixtures that could abut each other in a corner situation or something like that. Now, Mimi, I do notice in here the LED looks a little shorter. Is that normal?
Yes, it is. The LED is usually an inch shorter than the extrusion.
Okay.
And that is for end caps and then for soldering.
Got it. And there's also some room to put the wire in those different S&P locations, I think.
Exactly.
There we go. So that little extra space there. And sometimes the contractor in the field will want this option because maybe in the field something's a little different and they need an extra ½ inch or something. This being a dry tape, they're able to cut the end of it just with a pair of scissors nicely. You can cut the extrusion, mount it, and finish it as needed. They can do the same with the wet LED tape. We just please remember to silicone the end cap back on so it's waterproof again. We've had some issues with that. Okay. So we've looked at the 2 different types, and as you'll see with the finished fixture, we had that 48 was the total length, so there's only one length on the finished fixture. But the not installed, as we talked about, the extrusion will be 1 inch longer than the length of the tape itself. I should also remind you that LEDs have different cut points, so when determining your fixture length, if you're, let's say, using the RGBW with a 3.85 inch cut point, it's going to be a little more interesting trying to do the total run length versus our static white product with a 1 inch cut point. A little easier to do the math. Again, we're here to help you. No quizzes, I promise. All right. Let's now take a look at QCAP. So I'd mentioned QCAP before. And these are our fully encapsulated flexible fixtures. And they're available in a couple different bend profiles. So for example, right here we have, this is the Boxa. And so this is an up-down bend fixture. And the other over here is the Curve, and that's the side-to-side bend fixture. So what we're looking at here is similar to, let's go through the part number to see if there's anything in here that's confusing, but I know there's one area I would like to discuss. So here's a sample of the Curve. The product itself always starts, followed by the mounting options. The rating, so is it dry or wet rated, and that'll be the wire that's associated with the QCAP products. Mm-hmm. The color temperature, the output, which can be confusing. And here's the quick cheat sheet for that. The standard output is 1.5 watts per foot. The high output is 3 watts per foot. And the very high output is 5 watts per foot. And there was some suggestion to add that to the cut sheets, and I think we're working on that. And I think that makes sense. Followed by the lens type, which is encapsulated in either clear or translucent. And the ones we have here are translucent. The type, the connector in, connector out, end caps, that's a new one, followed by the length. Let's take a look. I see 2 in here that look a little different than stuff we've talked about before. So starting with the type, we've seen these before, S's and P's, same thing, right?
Yeah.
Single and pass-through. I see some new numbers. So let's show everybody what those numbers mean. The QCAP products were, the machine that makes these is limited to a nominal 16 feet or 191 inches. But the LED tape inside can go much further, depending on the type of LED tape. And so we've offered an option for a seamless fixture connection. So here, which I think we can see at the very top, is a clear end cap. So this is the curve, and it is clear. That was the end cap option, which I'll show when we go back to the ordering guide in one moment. But with those new single and pass-through 5 and 6, we now have these new connectors that we can make that seamless look. So, for example, here with the curve, actually that's not, let's do the boxa. So by connecting them together with the seamless options, and this one here is the pass-through.
Yep.
And a S, and these are the 5 and the 6. Again, this is not a quiz. We have application engineers on part of our team, and they certainly can help you with all of this. But just letting you know the option is available, so if you are looking for that seamless look, we can do that for you. The next would be the connector in and connector out. So we've talked about bare wires and barrels before, which can make the connections easy. Currently don't have the barrel connectors for all of our fixtures yet. So the RGB, RGBW, they're not available yet, but I understand we're working on them. So that might have been a secret, and Gian might be mad at me. But you've heard it here first. And then that final option was either the white or the clear ends. I bet all of them are clear for the seamless look.
Yep.
Yep, they're all. But again, I showed you the clear end is part of that seamless look, so the light will shine into each fixture and give the appearance that there's nothing there at all. So this is a quick overview of the different single and pass-through in the locations. Again, no quizzes, just showing options available. We'd love to work with everybody out there on setting it up to make sure it works perfectly, but just illustrating that we can do this. Here's a great drawing of the connector itself. Actually, this is a good point to bring up. So the connection point for the fixtures here are connected with clips normally, especially when the fixture needs to curve. So this happens to be the boxa. We make that connection, and by using the clips every 6 inches or so, we can make these really interesting shapes, as seen on that little drawing there. So another one of the features and benefits of the QCAP products, and why that seamless connection is very important. Okay, now on to power supplies. All right, so this is the QTM DC plus capacitor, and this is one of our magnetic phase control dimming power supplies. And there are a couple of options here. Would you like to go through what the options are for ordering these power supplies?
Sure.
Let's do it.
Well, the first thing we need to know is what size.
Okay. So like the wattage, or like the size of the box?
The wattage.
The wattage, got it, okay.
And then once that's been determined, we also need to know the primary voltage, secondary. All of our LED is 24 volt. So if you're using our LED, you want to make sure you have a 24 volt power supply. For the primary voltage, because these are magnetic transformers, They're made, right here in Connecticut. You cannot change the primary voltage from 120 to 277. So we do need to know what the primary voltage is, and that's very important because that can't be
changed
in the field.
It's the way they're made. It's actually the number of
Yes.
turns around the size of a core. It's a little
Yeah.
above my head, all the math that goes behind it, but I do know
Yeah.
you can't just swap it out.
Yes.
It's more complicated.
And that, for some reason, that is something that's often left off of POs.
Interesting. Well, that makes it challenging, doesn't it, to send the right product?
Yes.
And so after the sort of the size, the wattage of the power supply, the primary option, the secondary option, I see some breaker numbers and
Yes.
amperage.
Yes.
That's interesting. They get to pick their breakers, huh?
We need to know what the breaker options are.
Okay.
And we will, let them know the standard because for example, for the 100 watt, it's usually 1/4
Okay.
for class 2.
Right.
So if that's not picked, we will let them know what the standard options are, but they do need to tell us what they want.
Right. Because there are a couple of different ways to use the power supplies.
Yes.
And without getting into all of the details, just let us know what you're trying to do and we can make a recommendation. The standard would be the number of breakers to determine sort of a class 2. So 96 watts
Yes.
would break up the power supply depending on how big it is. There are other options available and we can work with them. Just to make things more confusing, and I apologize. So the next option, so that is our, I would say our Rolls Royce. That is our top of the line power supply. That capacitor, that big blue cannon there, dims all the way to black. Fabulous option. Another one of our QTM options is the eLED. So this is an electronic version. And I see there's a couple of options here as well. So this one looks like it can go up to 300 watts. So it's available from 100, 200, or 300 watts. This is universal. What does that mean?
That makes me a little happier because that means that I don't usually have to ask if they want, 120 or 277. It's universal,
Got
so
it.
it can work.
Okay, good. You plug it in and that side works, but you got to pick the
Yes.
secondary.
You do.
Okay, so 24 volts for our products.
LED, yes.
But again, we do make them in a 12 volt option for fixtures by others. And then I see on here we've got the dimming choices. This is
Yes.
important.
Yes.
Not only because you want your products to dim properly, but the QTM eLEDs all start the same, and then there's quite a few options. So DMX looks like this as well, and warm dim.
Exactly.
So we definitely need to know that.
Yes. And if we don't have the, if it doesn't, it's just the QTM eLED with nothing additional, that's usually the non-dim version. So it's important that we're aware if you want dimming, 0 to 10, warm dim, adjustable, or DMX.
Because they won't actually have modules inside, so it won't work.
Yes.
It's not like there's a magic switch. Okay. And then what about colors? Does this one come standard in a certain color?
This one comes standard in white,
Okay.
but it's also available in black.
All righty. So if you don't pick, we will send you white.
Yes.
Okay. And now, this is our new favorite.
Yes.
Do you want to introduce the QZ? We've introduced it, but we want to talk about, again, why it's our favorite.
This is my favorite because this one leaves the least amount of guesswork usually.
Okay.
You can pick based on what size you want. It's available in 30 watts, 60, 96, 192, and then 288. So basically, if you can tell us what size it is, then we can...
The rest of it works?
We can, yep.
Right.
And it's also good because, and part of the reason that works is because it's got the option in the field, you can have it as phase dimming or 0 to 10.
Wow. So you just tell us the size and
Yeah.
maybe pick a color if you
Yep.
don't want white?
Yep, white is standard. It's also available in black.
Okay, so it'll come in white unless you choose black. Okay. Well, excellent. Well, that is a brief review of some of our products and the ordering and some of the sort of those details that have not really focused on in previous webinars. Again, if you have any other questions, products that we didn't cover today, please reach out to your rep or your regional. We'd love to answer those specific questions. And we have Shannon here today. Shannon, do you have any questions out there?
Is the QZ replacing the IQ D010 9620.
Yes, it is. So the QZ offers so many more benefits. It's indoor and outdoor rated. It comes in all of those different wattages we had mentioned, and the option of dimming phase or 0 to 10 chosen in the field. We thought it just gives many more choices to our customers. So yes, we have phased out the D0 to 10.
But it also has models that are less than 96 watts and also has models that are greater than 96 watts. So it really does a lot.
Yep.
Yeah.
What are the pros and cons to sending the fixture installed versus uninstalled, which I think you guys covered.
Okay.
But as a recap, it's really contractor based and project based. So is the rule of thumb that all not installed fixtures should have LED that is an inch shorter?
Yes.
For LEDs with 1 inch cut points.
1 inch cut point.
Yes.
So there is nuance.
Correct. I think you're asking two questions there, Maura. One is that the cut point of the LED is really what's going to drive the fixture length altogether. So if there's a 4-inch cut point, then the fixture can be made by 4 inches, and the extrusion will still be 1 inch larger than that cut point.
Cool. But it's a good rule of thumb.
It is a good rule of thumb. Yes, absolutely.
Are you able to dim to 1%?
Yes, we are. Even lower than 1%.
How low?
It all the way to black.
On our phase.
Yes, on our phase, the DC plus cap.
And
that
our
we saw
QZ goes to
0.1%.
Oh, wow.
We had another question come up. What is the Class 2 limitation? Class 2 is a low voltage wiring method that's safe from the risk of shock as well as the risk of fire. So that means you're limited to 96 watts at 24 volts. So it's 4 amps at 24 volts. You take 4 times 90 or 4 times 24, you get 96. That is your limitation on a run when you're using Class 2 for 24 volt. For 12 volt, it's actually 5 amps, so that's 60 watts. It's really a limitation that the amperage creates the heat in the wire, not the voltage. So it's safe from not only shock, but also heating up and melting the wires or something like that.
Thank you very much, everybody. We really appreciate your time today.
Certainly.
Have a great rest
Thank
of the
you.
week.